everybody. My dad thinks his podcast is amazing, so please subscribe, give it 5 stars or whatever, and maybe he'll finally stop talking about it. Anyways, welcome to Sobriety.
Welcome back, everybody. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of the things. You can watch on YouTube and Spotify. You can listen on Apple Podcasts. We're in the process of actually getting the podcast up and running on other platforms as well. I'm hoping soon it will be on all listening platforms. So to be announced. But again, like, comment, subscribe, share. The best thing you can really do is listen and share. We want to keep our content free and accessible. We don't require any sort of subscription or money, and we would like to keep it that way. We want to get the information out there, and the more people we can help and reach, the better.
And make sure, as Lily says at the end, make sure you always hit that notification bell. We do post episode every week, but sometimes we may throw in a special episode and you want to get notified when that happens. So make sure you're clicking on that as well.
Follow us on Instagram. We're going to start doing more lives and things like that. So little nuggets that we're putting in there. So onward. Who do we have today, Ryan?
Today we have another friend of mine who is the closest thing to a sober twin as you could possibly get. I think we're just 2 days apart in our sobriety. She is my good friend, Gina Elizabeth. Hey, Gina, how are you?
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing really good. Have you gotten any snow up there yet?
There's a little tiny bit coming down right now.
There you go. Nice.
Keep it up there.
Yeah.
Just keep that up there.
Better than all this wet ass rain that we have right now. I'm about over that over the past couple days.
Yeah, that's pretty much all we have, actually. I think it's supposed to be 50 degrees on Christmas, which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Crazy for us up here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was just telling everybody in your introduction there that I think we're the closest thing. You're the closest thing to a sober twin that I have.
I haven't found anybody closer.
No.
Yeah.
So I proclaim us sober twins, and that's it.
I'm biased to the name Gina because I have a very good friend whose name is Gina. So y'all are good people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
me too. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Well, Gina, let's talk about your sobriety journey. So what was it that made you change your relationship with alcohol?
Oh, my goodness. As is true of everyone, I'm sure that it could be a really long story. I've had a strange relationship with alcohol basically my whole life. I mean, when I was a kid, I had aspirations to become a drinker. Like I couldn't wait. The adults in my life who drank seemed to have so much fun. It seemed to be this mark of the adulthood or growing up and mark of sophistication somehow. I actually used to pour cups of apple juice and be like, oh, this is beer. Yeah, and cups of red Kool-Aid and be like, oh, this is red beer, because some of the adults in my life drank those. And so even before I started drinking, I had a dysfunctional relationship with drinking.
Yeah,
because I was looking forward to it when I was a kid. So yeah, I had my first drink at probably about 10. And then I've been reflecting this past year, that 2024 is going to be the first entire calendar year that I've not had any alcohol since I was 10 years old. And that's crazy to me. I've had
Mhm.
long stretches before, because I have 3 kids and I was able to, I didn't drink at all during that time. And so that's great, but I've never gone an entire year, like, January to January.
Mhm.
Um, so I have a long, long history with drinking. I feel like I've heard a lot the story that people really ramped up their alcohol use during COVID, and that is also the case with me, but it was for a completely different reason. I'm a nurse in the emergency room, and I was actually doing charge at that time already. And during that time, for reasons we can keep talking about later if we have time, it really pushed things into a level of excess that I had not reached before. Even though I had been, a heavy drinker for a long time.
Mhm.
But yeah, so it was really that I didn't start to address it until a couple years ago. Because I really just started to recognize I'm doing this every day. I'm escaping my life. And so I have a story that I've heard so many other people say that they don't remember how they downloaded Reframe. I don't remember.
Mhm.
I was probably drinking. I mean, I was drinking every day. So, and the thing that drew me in though to Reframe was the cutback track, because I had absolutely no intention of stopping drinking. None, and I still, when I think about it, I still think like I am the last person that I ever would have guessed would stop using alcohol entirely. It was such a big part of my identity. But so I downloaded Reframe. I started on the cutback track. I did cutback for 9 months, and I did cut back. I cut back a lot, but I kept doing this cycle of that I would have a few days alcohol free, and pretty much by the time I ever got to day 4, that was it. Like I couldn't ever get any more than that. Um, and I didn't even realize there were meetings until 7 months in, by the way. So I just used it as like a drink counter, so I wasn't taking full advantage of the experience. But I started going to cutback meetings at 7 months in. And basically, I mean, the relationship that I developed there with Heidi specifically, Coach Heidi, is what kept me there. She actually, she just has a way of talking to people like she personally cares about everybody that she's responding to, and I felt like she saw me, and
Mhm.
without that, I don't feel like I probably would have stayed. Because up until then, I was like, count my drinks, whatever. It wasn't that impactful of an
Mhm.
experience for me. But was doing cutback, and I felt like I was just on this hamster wheel of like, okay, I have a couple alcohol-free days, then I have a drinking day, drink way too much, and it was just this cycle that happened over and over again. And there was like a week that happened when I was on a trip, and supposedly I'm on cutback. Like supposedly I'm trying to stop using alcohol as much as I did. And during that week, heavy drinking, I was visiting family, drank every day with my family. I was flying back, drank in the airport, during the day on my way home, got back, kept drinking all night. And it was just, when I woke up that next morning, I was like, had just palpable disgust for myself, mostly because I was like, I have been trying for 9 months to get some kind of a hold on this, Um, and so, gosh, how long there's a story, there's a miracle, there's a story I can tell. I don't know. Are we, I don't know if I should get right into it.
Sure. Yeah. Go
Of course
ahead.
you should. Yeah.
Dive into it. I want to hear it.
So there's a miracle that happened. I didn't believe it either, but it is true. So there's this week that happened that was just excessive drinking, even though I was trying to cut back. And I got home, and that day I was just like, I have got to string together 5 to 7 alcohol-free days. That was my goal, because I could never get more than 4.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, 5 to 7. I have got to get 5 to 7 days of alcohol-free. And at that time, I still didn't have any intention of quitting. And then I limped through the first couple days, got to day 4, and I was just like, this is impossible. I can't do this, and I had got to that point where I had failed over and over and over again. And I feel like I basically got to a point where, like, I cried out to God. Like, I am at the end of myself here. I am at the end of what I'm capable of. And I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. This feels impossible. And that was even just trying to get 5 to 7 days.
Right.
And I woke up the next morning, and I had absolutely no taste or smell. I had lost my sense of taste entirely. And this went on for the next 10 days. And I was not otherwise ill.
Mhm.
I didn't have COVID. I took 5 to 6 COVID tests.
Holy cow.
Because I was like, what is happening? What is going on?
Right.
But no, it was complete to the point where I couldn't have told if I was drinking coffee or hot water or wine or water or anything. I had no taste or smell. And that is the thing that got me over that 4-day, the day 4. And so at that time, with that 10-day space in between, I ended up doing 17 days alcohol-free. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I've gone a long time. This is great, And then I went out to dinner with my family, no big deal. And I decided it was okay to have a glass of red wine. Prior to this, I had been drinking at least a bottle of red wine a day.
Mhm.
At least that was just baseline.
Right.
And so I had a glass of red wine, and then I decided, like, it was my cutback goal that I was going to have 2. And so I had 2 glasses of red wine at dinner, came home, and was fully back into, like, the switch had flipped in my brain. I was like, I need all the alcohol now, all of it.
Yeah.
And through the cutback journey, I had gotten so I didn't keep a bunch of alcohol in the house anymore, because I realized that I couldn't. So I didn't really have anything. And I had made a friend at that point through Reframe that I was texting her, and I was like, what do I do? I want to go to the store. I can't, I'm freaking out. And it was actually that relationship with her that helped me not go to the store. And then I was digging through my cupboard that I used to keep alcohol in, and I found this little tiny bottle that used to have Jägermeister in it. And there was like this little teaspoon at the bottom of this empty bottle of Jägermeister. And so I drank that, like another little extra teaspoon. I went to the sink and I filled it up with water, and I drank that again, just in case I could get a little bit more.
Right.
And so I'm standing there at the sink with my, my watered down Jägermeister that I'm trying to eke out the tiny little bits that I can get. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to stop.
Mhm.
Like, I can't, there will be no moderation for me. So that was my turning point. And, yeah. And quitting entirely, oh my gosh, it sucked.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And I'm
especially
lucky enough that I was not physically addicted to alcohol, because I could quit for several days at a time. And I had
Mhm.
in the past. And I know there's people that have to be like medically withdrawn and that kind of stuff. And luckily I didn't need that. I was never at that place. But even without that, it was incredibly difficult, and yeah, so it's been an amazing journey. But now, as you know, we're almost 19 months
Mhm.
here. I'm,
Yeah.
579 days alcohol
Yeah.
today. So
That's right.
yeah,
And like you said, yeah, that first, when I'd made that decision, that first 2
yeah.
weeks was fucking
Oh, it's
tough. I
horrible.
was like, I didn't think I could do this. When you're drinking, for me it was basically 12, 18 beers a night to just cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I read was, you're going to go through these withdrawals, physical symptoms that you're talking about. And luckily for you and I, we didn't have that. Mine was more mental.
Absolutely.
It was like, what am I going to do to fill my time now, instead of just sitting here watching The Office for the 2000th time and just sitting here drinking, hammering beers all night till I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And that's when I had to really, and I would like to get your take on this too. That's when I really kind of dived into the app,
Yeah.
right? So it was the meetings, and for me, listening to other people, finally hearing other people have the same issues I have and how they combated them. I
Absolutely.
didn't know how it was for you, but how was it for you when you said, okay, cutback's not working, I'm going alcohol free.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to put that work in. How was that change for you? And then how, like, first 30 days or so.
Well, I kept being in denial that it was actually happening over and over
Mhm.
again, because it had become a point of pride with me, and I just, like, I prided myself on that I was good at drinking, you know.
Right.
Like, that, as if that's something to be proud of. But
Yeah.
it's true. It's like, so I've been a nurse for, gosh, this month will be 24 years.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
And so, of course, I see people, and I've worked in the ER for like the last 13.
Mhm.
And so I see people, of course, that would come in, unconscious, pass out drunk every day, and it have these interactions with people at work that I'd be like, you're killing yourself, you got to quit this, and then I would go home and drink red wine until I passed out.
Right.
So it was just this amazing level of hypocrisy that I had. And also because I worked in the ER for so long, I still work in the ER. And I see, all this trauma and things that, like, drinking and driving does to
Mhm.
families, people, I see
Yeah.
just horrible, horrible things. I also would never drink and drive. I never, like, went to work when I had been drinking or anything like that. So I had all these structures in place that I felt like, I got this. Like, this is
All right.
this is not a problem, because this is fine, and I had all this stuff in place that I was just, I'm a person that drinks heavily. I always have been, and it was like this huge identity shift to start trying to conceptualize myself as a person that gets through life without alcohol.
Mhm.
And that was rough. It's still rough every once in a while. We learn in Reframe in our meetings about these neural pathways that we have, that we spend so many years, digging them in, and they're still
Mhm.
there. Like, we've jumped out of them. We've crawled out of these deep neural pathways that we have, but every once in a while, I'll just kind of slide right back into them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the
You
biggest
know,
thing for me. I felt like I had to change my identity.
Oh, yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, I worked in healthcare for 12-ish years, and the majority of my friends still work in healthcare.
Mhm.
Like, I know tons of doctors, nurses, all the things. Um, And, there's a joke that we make the worst patients, right?
Oh,
And we're
yeah.
like, ha ha ha, we make the worst patients. But there is this sort of self entitlement that you feel when you work in healthcare, like, I know what I'm doing, or this sort of underlying feeling of I'm immune, knowing that you're not.
Mm-hmm.
But we always say knowledge is power, which is true. That statement is true. But sometimes too much knowledge is so dangerous, right? Because you really think that I can self diagnose, I can self medicate, I have this under control. Like, I'm not drinking or driving, I'm not showing up to work drunk. I'm drinking red wine. We believe in all the hype about, well, if I'm going to drink, then this alcohol is better than the other. And I eat a balanced diet and heart health. I mean, you really can, I don't want to say no too much, but for lack of a better phrase, like no too much, because just we're talking about neural pathways, just anything when it comes to that. It is a constant battle of the mind. You are trying to reprogram your own brain. And I've said this on previous podcasts, but when people, say things like, oh my gosh, that's all in your head. Yeah, that's a huge fucking statement. You're right. If it were in my toe, it would be a lot easier to fix. Okay. Like, that's huge. But I see that too. And also just with the healthcare system in general. I mean, it's always been very strained, but especially during COVID, you as a nurse, I'm sure you work 12, 18, sometimes 24-hour shifts, when you work, a lot of people don't know that when you work in healthcare, especially when you work in emergency health, it is not necessarily a clock in and a clock out. Like, you're not a hospitalist where you're just like seeing patients. Working in a hospital is much easier. You clock in and you clock out. But when you're in an emergency room and doing direct, patient care, your patients are coming and going, you don't leave until you have that opportunity. And then sometimes you have to say, I have to hand this over to someone else and leave. But you're right. Like, I don't know if your hospital is a trauma center or not. You said you see a lot of trauma, right? So in a trauma center, it is not unusual to work 24 hours sometimes and just sleep occasionally. And when you do that and you go home, you feel like, oh, well, I've been on it and I haven't been drinking and I deserve this, I deserve to unwind. So what I'll ask is, you still work in the emergency room. And though I have never worked in the emergency room, my best friend worked in the ER for a very long time. She's a medical lab technician. So she actually used to work in the lab there. So I'll say anything that went into or came off of someone's body, would go through her hands, doing a lot of the life flight stuff. And it is very stressful. And it is very difficult to not take some of those home. You become like desensitized to some of it. I hate to say that, but you have to. But it's impossible to become desensitized to all of it. So I'm sure that was a huge coping mechanism for you. So when you have one of those like really rough days, you see kids, you see, refugees, exactly the kind of like patients. I mean, none of them are great, but there are some that really stick with you.
Yeah.
What have you found is like your coping mechanism that when you're really trying to deal with some of the trauma that you see every day?
Well, everything that you just said was incredibly relevant to how I had gotten into like such a heavier pattern of drinking even than I had prior. You're right that there is some level of desensitization that happens. It's not that we don't care. I mean, everybody there wants the best for people. We want to take care of people. But there is absolutely no way that you can treat every tragedy as a tragedy for yourself, because you
Right.
have to keep working. You have to go to the next room. You have to, and so we see horrible things. I've seen I can't even begin to guess how many people I've seen die. It's, I have no idea. It's, and I can't, like, if every one of those affected me, like when my mom died, like there's no way I'd be on the floor, I couldn't possibly keep working. So there is some level of that happens. But then you mentioned that every once in a while there's something that really gets to you, which it was the case with me. It had been, COVID was terrible, first of all. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but being in the ER, I felt like, I was in charge most days that I was there. And so being in charge is a position that everybody's mad at, because you're
Yep.
assigning
Right.
people patients, you're pushing patients up to the floor, you're trying to get people to take it, you're in charge of the flow of the department and all the ambulances coming in and life flight and all that kind of thing. So that in itself I felt like it was almost like a role I had to hypnotize myself into. Like this is the job I do now. And it was it's an environment where you almost pride yourself on not needing any self-care. I work 12 hours without a break. I never sit down to eat. I never, I maybe go to the bathroom, maybe, and it's almost like a point of pride, because it would happen that somebody every once in a while would be like, okay, I'm going to leave the floor and take a lunch break. And other people would be like, what's she doing?
Mm-hmm.
And, in a 12-hour shift. And that's what a typical shift is for me. And so, you get into this place where there's trauma happening, there's death happening, there's all these horrible things happening. And you're just like, this is fine. I don't need a break. I don't need anything. I just, and that's kind of the culture there. And I got very into that. I got very much into, I am super tough. I don't need things. I can handle anything. I can, and that became my work persona. And then what I ended up doing night after night was coming home and just shutting it down. Like I don't want to form any memories from this day. Like I
Right.
just like, nope, I am not processing anything that happened. I would come home and drink. And that was going on. It was so difficult to be in a place where we were caring for people that were super, super sick. We didn't know what was going on. Everybody was afraid.
Right.
None of the other departments would even go into the rooms. And of course, nobody was taking patients either, but we were the place that couldn't close their doors,
Right.
And I very much had a sense that we were kind of like the sacrificial lambs, like everybody else got to say, well, I'm not going to expose myself to this. I'm not going to expose myself. You guys go.
Right.
You guys,
Yeah.
So that was
Like you chose this.
Yeah.
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 It's on you now.
Yeah. And so, the staff, everybody's terrified. Everybody's like, am I bringing this home to my family? Is this how, I
Right.
work with a gal who's a cancer survivor, and she was in tears one day at the desk. She's like, is this how I'm going to die? Is this what's going to get me? And it was just a terrifying time. And then half the people didn't believe it was real.
Right.
And so we also had to deal with like this level of animosity. We're already in this place where we feel like are we risking our lives? Are we risking our family? And then we had to deal with people who were angry with us for having the audacity to say that COVID was real. And so it was just this crazy time to deal with. And it was just like, I don't want memories of any of this. But then even in the midst of that, and this is kind of a trigger thing for some people, so I will say
we put a trigger warning on every single
Okay.
episode, so you feel free to speak openly.
I also can't say a whole lot in detail about it, but I was involved in a case where an infant came in who essentially ended up being that he was beaten to death by people in his life that, you know, and I ended up getting really involved in it because I was in charge. So I was dealing with the nurse that was in that room. I was dealing with, you know, some of the care that was happening there, but I was also dealing with law enforcement, and, you know, they were there investigating things, and there was a lot of strange dynamics that happened between, like, there was some things that were going on that made it a little bit questionable what was going on. Like, it wasn't entirely clear, but my little sensors went up and I was like, this was not an accident. This is very bad. Um, and then, yeah, I was involved in that process with law enforcement, and it turns out, yeah, it was just as awful as I thought it was. It was not an accident, and it had been going on for a very long time. Well, not a very long time because it was a baby, but so after that, um, I was coming home. I was drinking every night. It was already bad enough. And then I had this new aspect of that I was dreaming about this baby every night and, like, thinking about it all the time. And yeah, I think that the combination of all of those things, it just pushed my alcohol use to a level that I never even knew that I was capable of.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you lose hope in humanity too. I can see being like, what is the point of all
Yeah.
of this? I mean, and when you work in healthcare, I worked in nonprofit reproductive healthcare. So not emergency care, but a whole lot of trauma. We dealt with a lot of abuse, sexual assault. I mentioned refugees, things like that. Big underserved population. So we got a lot of, child abandonment and things like that. And you do, when you're in it so thick and you see such dark sides of the world and of people, and you go into healthcare because you want to help, like you want to be one of the good guys. You want to be Superman or Superwoman and be like, I can heal. And you know that you can't save everybody, right? Like you've accepted that. But when you see the real, and you know this because we've been married for the better duration of that, you see some of the dark, dark, dark sides of things. And when in certain healthcare fields, you're dealing with more of the dark than the light, you do have moments where you're like, why does any of this matter? Not in a suicidal way, but in a, why the hell do I want to get sober?
Yeah.
Like, if this is what the world is comprised of, then my goodness, how is anybody supposed to navigate it, white knuckle it through? So I hear what you're saying. I get it. I have very similar stories about, victims of trafficking and, mothers just leaving their children at our office and things like that. And you still become one of the good guys, but you're just like, man, you want to believe the majority of people are good, but it's hard when you're in a field where you see the majority of the bad. And I think that's very predominant in healthcare, is a lot of, even if it's not addiction, it's a lot of mental health related stuff, because you're right, in medicine and even like in sports, in a lot, I mean, the majority of professional work fields, it is work, 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 work. The more you can work, that means that you're tough, right? Like, you fall down, you break a bone, you don't eat for 12 hours. Like, that just shows resilience, right? And it's like, who the fuck are we kidding with this bullshit? Like, that is such bullshit. That just means that you are living a life that you are trying to please everyone else. And you can still be a hero, because you got to be a hero to yourself first, right? Like, you can't show up to the ER and help anybody if you are pouring from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And have you found any instances where, I know, again, same thing in healthcare, you don't tell your personal stories, you don't make it personal. Like, I would get a lot of questions about religion and this, that, or another. And we have our own ways of navigating around that, because you don't want to project your own stuff onto people. And it's also just a liability. Like, well, she said,
Yeah.
But have you found instances where I know you've had people coming in overdosing and detoxing and stuff, but that you feel like your sobriety has really like it's like an additional, tool, or that you can provide for people? Again, like, there are always those patients that you feel comfortable to say, hey, listen,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand. You're not alone.
Yep.
Like, how has that been to kind of go on the better side? Because when you really help people and you can share that, all of that tragedy and that shittiness, all of a sudden you're like, man, it gives you that like dopamine. Like, I remember why I went into this.
Yeah. And you're right. That instance has come up now several times. And it is a weird line to walk, because I need to keep some professional distance, but I used to be so much more dismissive of people. Even though I was drinking myself, I somehow had this like, well, but he's ruining his life.
But he's different. Yeah.
I'm a nurse. I work 12 hours a day, and I never call in, and I haven't even peed today.
Yeah.
So we are not the same. Okay. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. But my level of empathy for people who are suffering from addiction, and not just alcohol, anything, now, with this, with the process that I've been through over the last year and a half, and well, more when I was on cutback. But it's given me so much more empathy for just people come in with this level of self-hatred that is just heartbreaking. And I'm not sure why I was ever callous to that when it came to addiction, because even separate from that, I'm a person who struggled with depression my whole life, and so it's not as though I was any stranger to self-hatred. But for some reason I was like compartmentalizing, when people come in and they would be just like, why do I keep doing this? I keep messing this up. Like, they've lost their wife has left them, they're not seeing their kids anymore, and they hate themselves so much, but it's still, isn't leading to that they could stop drinking. And I'm so much more sympathetic to that now, because like I said, I was never even physically addicted to it. And this is the hardest thing I've ever done, probably, in its totality, because it's something you have to recommit to all the time, and you have to keep learning about it, and you have to keep engaging in it. Because I'm super, super busy. I'm in grad school. I'm a mom. I still work at the ER. I'm doing my clinicals now. I'm so busy all the time. And sometimes I kind of let the things slide. Like, I don't know. I don't go to meetings anywhere near as much as I used to. But even just the effort that I put into it, sometimes I don't feel like I have time for it. And recently I was writing in my journal, and yet the whole thing I started journaling, and I hadn't picked up a journal in years. I used to journal when I was a teenager, but I have actually started journaling through this whole sobriety journey. And I picked up my journal. It was not too long ago. It was like a month or two ago, that I was like, why is it a surprise when I know that I am falling down on how much I'm engaging in taking care of myself? Like, it's surprising to me that I'm feeling worse again.
Right.
Like, why is this a surprise? There's no mystery here, and it's just one of those, you have to keep committing to it. And that's what makes it hard. It's like, I've said on meetings before, and I don't share a whole lot in meetings, by the way. I'm I'm really conscious about like, well, I don't want to take time away from other people who need it, you know, so I don't talk a whole lot. But yeah, it's like I've said on a meeting before that I keep having this expectation that somehow once I've put enough work into this, like once I've worked on this enough, I've done enough recovery, I've done enough reading, I've done enough journaling, I've, you know, loved myself hard enough that someday this is going to be enough, you know, like I'm just going to be done. I get to be done. And yeah, that's a disappointment I've had to face several times over now, that it's like, no, I just don't, you don't ever get to be done. It's,
No,
you know, it gets
it's every
way
day.
easier. But
Well, and those in healthcare, I hate to keep bringing it back to that,
that's
but
fine.
like I identify, and I mean, I'm convinced that people who choose healthcare are all kind of plucked from the same, you know, species of plants. You know, they may not be the exact same plant, but they are most certainly like the same species. We're mathematical and science based, right? I used to always say that I love math because it's an equation and it yields an answer. And if for some reason you don't get the answer you're looking for, it's the same thing with, you know, science, then you just go back and you rework the problem and you make minor tweaks until you get the result, or you don't yield the result. And then you have to figure out, you know, what it is behind that. So I think it's a very like clinical way of thinking. I also think that the previous lack of empathy, not sympathy, but empathy in your job field is because until you're ready, willing, and able to face the things you're struggling with, then they will always present themselves as something to be deterred, right? So it goes back to the same, like if we go out, okay, and I'll use myself as an example. So I haven't had a drink in over 6 months. And I made the decision that I don't think I'm ever going to drink again because it doesn't bring me anything good. It does not provide anything. But I don't struggle with drinking. Like I can moderate. I am, you know, I don't struggle with it. I just personally don't want to drink. So if we go out and I'm like, oh, you know, I don't drink, people automatically make the assumption that I'm an alcoholic or have a problem, right? And it makes them uncomfortable. Well, this is a huge assumption I'm making here. This is a very broad statement, but you know, is the discomfort in others because that it kind of highlights their drinking, or they don't understand it? Like it has nothing to do with me. Me not drinking does not, I mean, does not affect anybody. I have no problem with my friends drinking. You want to drink, have fun. Like I'm just glad I'm not going to have the hangover tomorrow, right? I'm glad it's not me. But it doesn't affect anybody. So I think, you know, that's, you said it's a miracle. It's a life's way of humbling you. I mean, you became a better, I'm sure, mom, nurse, human being, because again, being a, you know, a mom, a nurse, all those things, your patients and your kids see you as this entity. You know, it's like your teachers. When you were a kid, seeing your teachers like out at a restaurant was like, whoa, it was like a fish out of water. It's like, you actually live outside that school. Right. What are you doing? So like seeing your nurse, like not in scrubs, like out, like having dinner. It's like, you mean that you're not just a nurse all the time? So it humanizes you, right? And I think that's so important because then it even humanizes you for yourself. Like, oh, I actually do need to take a pee break, and I do need to eat, and I do need to sleep. Like those things are important. But they transfer, like you said, you've been slipping on meetings and things like that. It's that part of you that drives you to be such a good nurse that can also work against you. And I think that with anything, I'm using nursing here for you, but like for you, it's the same thing professionally. It definitely can push you to do good and better things, but then you also get stuck on, well, I don't want to take too much space up in a meeting. It's all the same. It all roots from the same places. I don't want to pee. You know, like I swear I'm going to make that a saying, like take a pee break, you know, even like, and that'll just be my little way of being like, relax for a moment. You know what I mean? Take the pee break, guys, take the pee break. You don't want a UTI, take the pee break. But it's so easy because sometimes the line between what is like satiating you and helping you and what is hurting you can be so invisible.
Yeah.
Because I tell people you don't need to be fixed because you're not broken.
Mhm.
You just need to understand your brain and need to understand that the problem is not that you don't need to take a break. That's not the solution, is working so much that you are chipping away at pieces of yourself.
Yeah.
The solution is to remember that you are a human being. Another thing in healthcare that I think can be really tough too is I had a lot of nurse friends who would be like, gosh, I went to a wedding last night and I drank and all this stuff. And I came in and my friend like hooked me up to a banana bag and I like laid in a room for a few hours. Do you even know what a banana bag is, Ryan? Okay. It's pretty much like electrolytes and fluids and all the things,
funny.
right?
I kind of figured that.
Well, it's because it's yellow, so it looks like banana bag. Yeah. But, you have that too, where you have this unlimited access to these resources and like, oh, and then in, a few hours I woke up and I felt better. Well, we trick ourselves into believing it, but, you need to get your hydration and everything from food and water and sleep and exercise. And so again, like, it's great that you have that access to that information and that you have the ability to help people. But at the same time, where's that line?
Mhm.
Like, you're in grad school right now. To pivot a little bit, what are you said you're in clinicals. Are you going to become like a nurse practitioner, or what are you going for?
Yeah.
That's amazing. You'll love not working 12-hour shifts.
Yeah. Or I can choose to work them if I want to.
You can.
Right.
That's right.
But
That's right.
I'm actually taking a really big pivot, and that was a big process for me too, is that I have 23 years I worked in ICU before I went to the ER.
Whew.
So I have 23 years of critical care, and I like taught the trauma class for my hospital, and I got to this place where I got to also be kind of like the person that people would go to learn things or to find out things, or and I decided I'm becoming a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
Wow. That's incredible.
And that was a hard decision to make, because I feel like I have all of this emergency medicine experience and all of this kind of stuff, and it was this sense of like, am I throwing this away somehow? But I really I feel like it's all working together really well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh,
I love
yes.
it. I am loving it. I'm in my practicum, so I'm doing all these clinical hours and that kind of stuff now, and I was worried that I wouldn't like it as much, and I love it. So it's
Awesome.
wonderful. So I have things that I'm super excited about now, and it's just amazing. And then I'll be able to bring my own experiences with
Right.
substance use to that as well.
So, I'm very curious, and I kind of want to go back to, what you were talking about when COVID happened, right? So obviously, you're working all the damn time. I'm sure you're short staffed.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
that's what we read about. And your mental health just had to be, awful at that time. I mean, I can only imagine, right? I'm just curious as far as, okay, so now we've been through it, a year or two, a couple years out. Have hospitals or is healthcare itself, have they been doing anything to help out people in ERs, ICUs, as far as mental health, like, having therapists there available, things like that, or mandatory breaks, mandatory, you're working so long, you've got to take a mental rest. Because I just can't imagine what that's done to people mentally, and probably, getting through that, they're probably like, screw this. I can't mentally even do this anymore. Like, even be in this position.
Yeah.
I was just curious to get your thoughts on that, of what's changed, or, what's different.
There have been some changes there. And I guess I had kind of meant to mention this before, but I felt like what the place that it had put me in with, dealing with COVID and then drinking all the time at home and everything, is that I basically got to a point where I wasn't feeling anything. Like, I just felt
Right.
like I was dead, and that's kind of what prompted me to even think about wanting to pivot away from the ER, because I really felt like I was starting to scare myself a little, that I had gotten to a point where I didn't care about, I mean, theoretically, yes, I care about my patients, but like I couldn't get myself to feel it, get myself to feel anything, so I just felt like I was dead inside. And a whole lot of people left the ER at that point. A whole lot of people quit. We lost a lot of staff. And then those of us that were still there were working short all the time. And, it was so hard. But I do feel like it opened up some people's eyes about, that people have limits. People have limits. You can't just push through absolutely anything. So there is a therapist I know that is specific to the hospital now. Like, that I've not seen him personally, but I know that there is one. And there's a team that they put together. They call it the For You team, which is very nice. And it's a nice thought. I feel like people who work in areas of the hospital that are not the ER were able to take advantage of, they had like a room that had a massage chair in it, and like, it would diffuse some lavender or something. And it was a great room. I went and saw it one day when, but I was like, this room has been there for years. There has never been a time where I was able to leave during work to go have a chill out time in the For You room, but it's there. And then whenever there's a really, I mean, it has to be something horrible, because we see people die all the time. But if there's something that's particularly traumatic, like the baby, like, several people dying, or people that we work with, we've had instances where, like, it's somebody that we all knew. There was a physician, an ER physician that died, and that was really hard on everybody. But they have like stress debriefings about that. Like, we have a chaplain service in the hospital, and sometimes they'll come and get involved in like a critical incident debriefing, they call it, where people are just able to come and kind of voice their thoughts about it and kind of talk it out a little bit. And again, that is something that exists. I have never gone to one.
Right.
but they're there.
But they are there. Well, that's good.
Well, and I to go back to you becoming a psychiatric nurse practitioner, it's difficult because it's a chicken and an egg situation. When you work in emergency care, it's not like a doctor's office or even a hospital where you like schedule patients or you assign rooms and things like that, and you have control over the in and out of things. In an emergency room, you have people coming in for all sorts of stuff, and you have to see every single one of them. You have to take every single one of, them seriously, because if you slack on one that you think, oh gosh, they're just coming in for a cold or a pregnancy test or whatever, then you can miss some vital things. And that is a huge deal.
Yep.
But the real fix to the problem is to start with mental health treatment, because an emergency room is the result of what happens with improper healthcare, improper, mental health diagnoses, accidents, that is, I always say that, kind of like in the position I was in a perfect world, we want to put ourselves out of business, because nothing is happening to anyone without their consent and, without it being well thought out. And what I was going to say about my mother is, I know what it says on her death certificate, but truly what she passed away from was a lifetime of untreated or improperly treated mental health.
Yeah.
From childhood trauma and, a lot of like eating disorders and body dysmorphia and things like that. She had weight loss surgery, bowel obstruction, the end.
Yeah.
But really it all rooted from mental health. So the way, and this is a very simplistic way to say it, but the way that you get the pee break is to have people who are in psychiatric healthcare who really are trying not to just push meds, but really trying to help people work through a lot of their, I hate saying issues or problems, but for lack of a better word, things they're struggling with, things that they're working through. I always say that too, like teach education it starts with kids. It starts with very, very young minds. You go all the way back, and I know that you've studied this in school. It's the whole nature versus nurture. There have all these studies where you have twins who are separated at birth and the similarities and the differences. And there's a lot about addiction that we just don't know.
Yeah.
Genetics play a role in it. We know that switch is always there. We talked about this on a previous podcast, but the scary thing is we really don't know. Yeah. We really don't know. We have some ideas, but we really don't know. So the best thing you can do is have people like you there. And I think that self-awareness to say, working in the ER, I have, sort of not outgrown it, but outgrown it within myself. Like I simply cannot provide the care that I once could, not and be non-robotic. I think that's an incredible leap.
Yeah.
You're just taking all of the things that you've done for 23 years and now you're getting to the root of the problem. You're not putting a pimple patch on, you're lancing that cyst. You know what I mean? Like, I love it. I think that's fantastic. So when do you graduate?
August.
Wow. So you're almost done.
I am. It's real. It's starting to feel like it might actually happen.
Wow. And you are not required to answer this question. How old are your kids?
I have a big gap. I have a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 20-year-old.
Okay. Yeah. That's kind of like us. So he has 2 kids from a previous marriage, or 3, excuse me. I always too many kids to remember. He has a 27-year-old, a 24-year-old, and an 18-year-old. And then we have our daughter, Lily, who is 13. And she is super close with her brothers and sister. But those are critical ages. How are they? Like, do they say anything about seeing you go back to school? Like, I think that's a huge thing to show them that you never stop working on yourself.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. Because there's a couple things that have happened with my kids. They have gotten to see me, take the initiative to go back to school, and I work really hard on that. And we've had to have some family conversations about that. That also means that I have less time for them. But, we talk about that it's not because I don't want it. It's not that, it's a short-term thing that I'm working towards. And I do think it's good for them to see that, to see that process. But while we're talking about things that my kids are seeing, one of the coolest things about this last year and a half has been the fact that I would open a bottle of wine while I was making dinner every day. It was just normal, and they just saw that, oh, it's normal. Mom has her wine, and I wasn't like, I would never get like slurry, stumbling, fall down drunk in front of them. But that was happening every day. I had my wine every day. And that was just something that was so normalized for them. I realize now. My kids are so proud of me that I have stopped drinking. Not so much my oldest, because, he's 20. He's looking forward to turning 21.
Yeah.
He wasn't living here when I stopped, because he's at college already. But my younger two, the 14-year-old and the 10-year-old, they are so on board. they're so excited. Like I would have my alcohol-free replacements, which were a big deal in the beginning, a lot less now. But I really relied heavily on, alcohol-free replacement drinks at the beginning. And they would get so into them, and I would order them online or get something sent to me, and they'd be like, "What is this? What is this?" And they get really excited about it. And then I would have like my different anniversaries and stuff when I first hit 6 months or when I hit a year alcohol free. Like I have a text, I'm going to cry. I have a text that I saved from my 14-year-old that he texted me, and he was just like, "I'm so proud of you, mama." And it was just, it's incredible. I have 3 amazing children, and I'm so lucky. And it's hard not to look back with all this regret, to be like, I spent so long deadening myself to my own life, you know. But they still turned out pretty amazing. And now to be in a position where they are really educated about alcohol use, and they've seen what a difference that it's made in my life. And I feel like, that has got to be good for them. I'm hoping. you know.
Yeah, and you're setting a hell of an example, and that's kind of what I learned, and I'm sure you have too. Leading by example to me is the best way to do
Yeah.
it. I felt like when I grew up, it was you do this, you do that.
Yeah.
I didn't have anybody showing me how to do it. It was just you're supposed to do
Yep.
it, and that was a big mind shift for me. Really changing that mindset of, well, if I lead by example, others will follow, or eventually they'll see the light. And to me, that's been huge for me, because I was, I did what I was taught. No, this is the way you're supposed to do it. No, that's not the right way. This is the right way.
Yeah.
Only because it worked for me, but it doesn't work for everybody that way. However, if I show an example, which is obviously what you're setting a great example for your kids, and they're seeing it, they'll get there their own way. Yeah. But seeing it and the results of it, to me, is, I get emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
My kids and the little changes that they've made in their life, even what, on the older kids with alcohol. I get emotional talking about it all the time, but it's hard not to, because I'm so excited about it. It's like, wow, I didn't do it. They're doing it, but I've kind of shown them the way. And to me, and surely you feel the same way. I mean, that's just got to be an incredible feeling.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's.
Yeah. And, you talked earlier about when you were a kid, you saw all of these adults who alcohol made them so happy and so everything. But your kids are seeing the flip of that, right? So they're actually seeing how happy you are without alcohol.
Yeah.
So they're seeing that you gave up alcohol and you became happier. And something that I talked to our 13-year-old about is, you can't unfortunately control whether you're an addict or not. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like once that switch is flipped, it's flipped. We know all the facts. So the hope is that we provide an environment to our children where we show them, when you're struggling, you reach out for help. It's not about being perfect. Yeah. It's not about not fucking up. It's about knowing that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to go in a closet and hide. That you can say, I'm scared. I'm scared. And I don't want to hurt myself. And I don't know what the solution to that is. That's what it's about right there, is being able to reach out and ask for help. And, you're providing a safe space for your kids. And, you of all people know from working in the ER, providing a safe space for your children makes a world of difference. Yeah. Night and day. And we are very proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's awesome.
speaking of pee breaks, to pivot for a moment, I figured that I had to say it. It was a great segue.
I was going to segue to it anyway. So, thinking back on your old drinking days, surely you have a funny or good pee story that you can share with us that would involve yourself and, of course, back in your drinking days, it involved that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have.
Remember, we said earlier she didn't have time for pee breaks.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
It could be when you were much younger. It could be like high school.
Yeah.
Something crazy.
Well, okay, I do have a story that's pretty funny, and it wasn't actually me. I was very involved in the drinking, but I had a friend that squatted down and peed on someone else's carpeted porch. And I remember being like, "There's carpet there. What are you doing?" And she was squatting down and she's like, "It's indoor, outdoor. It doesn't matter."
Like that made
it's good reasoning.
So I think that was good. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
That was perfect.
That works.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Gina, thank you so much for joining the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing. It was wonderful.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been great. I will say the one thing I wanted to make sure that I said, and I didn't say it yet, was that I feel like the biggest, most valuable shift that I made in my brain about drinking was that I used to think, like, this is helping me. I deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve, like this is a thing I need. I deserve it. Pivoting now to, I deserve a life without this. And I am deserving of a life without alcohol. And that's been the hugest shift. Yeah, and it's just beautiful.
That's a beautiful mindset to have, without a doubt.
And you do deserve it.
You do deserve it, big time. Especially all that shit you went through during COVID.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Of anybody, you really deserve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Gina, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
It's wonderful.
Can't wait to talk to you soon.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. If you love the podcast, which I know you do, please like, subscribe,
and hit that notification bell to
Boom.
get notified every time we post.
That's right. Dropping them, baby. Word.